Well, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. A wave of Ukrainian drone strikes has reached deep into Russian territory, targeting key energy infrastructure, including a major oil refinery in Tuapse, as Moscow continues its intensified attacks on Ukrainian cities. Now, according to sources speaking to TVP World, Hungary may be preparing to lift its veto on a proposed €90 billion package for Ukraine. Now, a letter from Prime Minister Viktor Orban indicates openness to dropping the blockade, while Cyprus has signaled that a potential agreement could be reached at an informal EU summit on Wednesday. Orban has been holding up critical EU funding for Kyiv amid an ongoing dispute related to the Druzhba pipeline. To discuss the latest developments, we're now joined by Rostyslav Khotin, Senior Editor at RFE, RL's Ukrainian Service. Good to have you with us.
Hello, Sasha.
So let's begin with this major announcement. These are sources telling TVP World this on Monday. Let's get your sense how, and rather why, Orban changing his mind on the news that Druzhba might be restarted as early as Tuesday. So first of all, give us your reaction and maybe your indication why he's now suddenly had this change of heart.
Because, first of all, President Volodymyr Zelensky has promised to restart Druzhba, to restart the oil flow via Druzhba friendship pipeline by the end of April. Apparently, Ukrainians are ready to restart the work of this pipeline even earlier. Maybe even today there are sources which are saying that. Maybe later this week, but the feeling is that Ukrainians have already repaired Druzhba pipeline, not the whole infrastructure in the town of Brod and Lviv region, but at least pumping station and the very pipe, not the all oil reservoirs there. I just want to remind you that it was hit by Russian drones and missiles at the end of January. It was a Russian strike, but Viktor Orban accused Ukraine of blocking the flow of oil via this strategic pipeline from Russia. So now it seems that it's ready to be relaunched. The flow will be restarted probably this week. And the Ukraine also wants Hungary to remove its veto on this 90 billion euros package of financing of Ukraine for 2026 and 2027. It's kind of a deal. But what should come first? That's the issue. Whether it's Ukraine to restart flow of oil via Druzhba pipeline, or whether it's removal of veto by Hungary and the first tranche of this huge financial package should arrive fast. We don't know. It seems that on Wednesday, tomorrow, the ambassadors in Brussels, the EU ambassadors in Brussels at the Coreper meeting will give green light to this 90 billion euro package for Ukraine for dispersal of the first tranche, which will be in Kyiv already within the next 10-12 days. And at the same time, Ukraine is opening Druzhba, relaunching oil supplies via Druzhba oil pipeline in the coming days, starting from today, even today, it might be possible. It's also important to underline that the start of the money flow to Ukraine within this huge financial package will happen under Viktor Orban. So he understands the importance of not alienate Ukraine. He understands the importance, but still he is blackmailing. Reopen Druzhba first, and then I will remove my veto. It's still kind of a trade on his part.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned there exactly about what comes first here. Now, some of those same sources I quoted earlier giving that information to us in Brussels have said that it could be even today, on Tuesday, that the pipeline could be reopened, the flows. Now, you've said it might take a bit longer, but at the same time, let's say, how realistic is it, though, that, with all the damage, the testing, etc., that these flows would continue? Would that be as simple as one day? Would we need more time for that? When would this, let's say, and also I guess it needs Russia to continue also to continue the flow for that to come to Hungary, right?
Yes. First of all, again, I want to mention that the flow was stopped in January because of Russian airstrikes against infrastructure of Druzhba pipeline in western Ukraine and Lviv region. So Russia could strike again. We don't know. And then Slovakia or Hungary under Orban, which leaves in the early May, could make again the impression that it was not Russia to blame. Russia should not be blamed, but Ukraine rather. Kind of that's a problem. First of all, we have to mention that Ukraine indeed made strikes against Druzhba pipeline, but on Russian soil last year, many times, several times. But again, I want to make a point that this time the whole crisis around Druzhba pipeline happened because of Russian strike, not Ukrainian actions. But we'll see. There is now a sense of compromise. Compromise is there. It's in the air. That Druzhba pipeline the oil will start flowing again, and the veto on this significant, massive financial package will be removed by Hungary. We have still a problem with Slovakia, but my feeling is that Robert Fico is not that kind of, he doesn't have a weight, political weight, which Viktor Orban had. The magnitude of influence of Robert Fico and Slovakia is much, much lesser than Hungary's and Viktor Orban's.
Yeah, and as you said, as we'll now learn more as those ambassadors for EU countries will come together Wednesday, and we have the Informal Leaders Summit as well in 2 days' time. So it will be some very intense days. Let's stay with energy for a moment now, Rostyslav. I want to get your sense. We've heard a lot about these major strikes by Ukraine deep into Russian territory, specifically this major refiner, Tuapse. I think this accounts one of the top 10 refineries in Russia. Tell us how significant these strikes are. How much does this impact Russia's ability, its financing? How sustainable are these attacks?
Yeah, this oil refinery is extremely important for Russian oil exports. It's located in Tuapse on the Russian Black Sea coast, on the eastern coast of the Black Sea on Russian territory. Ukraine struck it twice in recent days, and it was significantly damaged. Also, Ukraine struck recently Russian oil export infrastructure on the Baltic coast, in the Leningrad region, in the Russian Federation in the north, quite far away from Ukrainian territory, more than 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine. Also, Ukraine struck oil infrastructure on the Caspian Sea recently. So all in all, at maximum point, Ukraine damaged about 40% of Russian oil export facilities, oil export infrastructure, 40%. But Russia repairs also it's very fast. Now the figure stands at about 20 or slightly more. 20% of Russian oil export infrastructure has been damaged by Ukrainian airstrikes, by Ukrainian drones. The thing is that Ukraine thinks that these are legitimate targets because the oil export finance Russian war machine. Ukraine says that it's not targeting civilian infrastructure, but rather infrastructure which supports the flow of petrodollars, of Russian oil money to the state budget, which finances Russian armed forces, Russian army. So Ukraine indeed considers these legitimate oil infrastructures, legitimate military targets, and will continue doing so.
You mentioned drones there. I want to get also just briefly your sense. We've heard also of this being called that drone war between Ukraine and also Russia. Now there's apparently new robots coming in, AI autonomous drones as well, being developed potentially by Russia on both sides. But Ukrainian official also warning that some of these AI drones, autonomous drones, might also be on the battlefield. How significant would that kind of development be, and where you are with the drone developments for both sides?
You know, we hear quite a lot about air drones. We hear quite a lot about sea drones, which are actively used by Ukraine. But we don't hear too much so far about land drones. And apparently both sides, both Ukraine and Russia, developed quite significant number and abilities to use land drones. They're used for supply, logistical supplies. They supply ammunition and weapons. They supply food to the front lines. Now soldiers do not have to go and carry it physically. They evacuate wounded soldiers. They also, even there were instances when land drones took prisoners of war. They also can be used as kamikaze drones, to hit bunkers. And apparently thousands and thousands of them, 9,000 of them were used in months of April by Ukrainian armed forces. Now the artificial intelligence will be installed in them. They will become clever. But that's the future of the war. That's the future of the wars of the future. That land drones will be also robotic drones. They do not, as one Ukrainian soldier put it, they do not ask for food. They do not ask for sleep. They are not bleeding. They are not injured. They are to replace these soldiers on the most dangerous stretches of the front lines.
Yeah, so land, air, and sea drones. Really interesting, giving us the latest today. Thank you. Always a pleasure having you, Rostyslav Khotin, there from the RFE RL's Ukrainian Service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.